Good morning, Heather.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, hang on. Speaker's turned off. There we go. Um, all right. It's a little quiet.
I was gonna say, is it only me on the call?
Hey,
Because then
hey,
we don't
it
have to
is.
have it.
It's a one-on-one consult or a two-on-two consult. Is it mate? Two-on-one. I don't know I don't know what I'm saying.
No, it's all good. Look, I don't actually have any questions. I was just attending to hear because I haven't been able to attend for a while. So I was just here to hear for any other updates or hear any other questions. Um, so I don't
Fair
really
enough.
have anything. And I did email Heather, I suppose just some feedback on the data side.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you. And actually, I will do I want to honor the time you put into that. Um, and uh, and I'll give you a response to each one. The good news is that I think almost all of it, possibly all of the data, we are actually capturing, um, but we just haven't got an easy way to display and or export some of it at the moment. So so the good thing is that we're on the same page, right? As far as the types of things that we would want to see. There's a couple of things that I I can sort of manually produce and then give to you if there was a particular event that you would like or that you could use as a good example. um, for example, one of the things that I've got that often what I'm doing is prototyping some of the things that we will then rebuild, and so I sort of put them together and I sort of make the uh, the popsicle sticks version of it, and then hand it to the developers, and then they build it out into the system. And one of those things is I have a graph of the total number of people in Zoom across each day, spanning every 10 minutes. So we get a new data point every 10 minutes, and so then we can see the numbers as the time of day, and then for a graph for each day. It's one of those things that I've played with, and we find that quite helpful. One of the interesting things that I've heard, um, particularly on live streams before, there's a guy who has done lots of live streams, and I was talking to him about the types of data that he would look at, and he talked about having not just the total number of people, but the leaves and joins, right? And so two separate numbers because they can tell a different story. And so obviously, if you have someone that leaves and someone that joins at the same time, the number remains the same. Um, if you've only got a single number, whereas if you have the two lines, then you can start to see something where we had a lot of people that left then, and maybe we had some people join, right? But it actually tells another story, and so that's an example of an output that we can create because we are capturing leaves and joins of each individual person. Um, so yeah, I found it really helpful, and I'd love to continue the discussion about that.
Yeah. And look, Heather sent me two reports yesterday, or three reports, just to show us what was the total number of people that actually logged on and their duration. What was really interesting is it's exactly what you're saying. What it doesn't show us is the leaves and joins, because I
Mhm.
was looking at what is the peak number that I have at any one point. So if my peak number is
Mhm.
149, but Heather's report shows me that there were actually a total of 202 people, then
Mhm.
that would be super helpful, right? Because then I can use, I used VLOOKUP and I went, okay, who are the people that were leaving and joining at for example, I looked at increments of 20 minutes at a time. It's how many
Mhm.
people did we have at 20 minutes at a time? Now, people don't normally use data like that, but I have not just, I've got global event logistics experience like for 9 years, but I also have data experience because everything I did was using data in order for us to be better and to make content better, the experience better, et cetera, et cetera. So, so it was helpful to see you are tracking their data because she gave it to me, but it wasn't exactly like necessarily available when I needed it during the event, like necessarily. So yeah, the leaves and joins would be great.
Yeah, so I think one of those, and I don't know, Heather, if you did the full log, there's like a kind of like a raw log, and that would have each individual person, and each one of their leaves and joins. And so I don't know if you've got that export.
No, it was the one that just has the daily total times.
Yeah, okay. I'll have a look. So that's another one that I've played around with, is sort of getting every time someone leaves and joins. So then of course it's a big, we call it a log, because then it's really like every leave and join. And then the next aggregate one that I do is each day, each individual person for each day, and then total for the event. So sometimes people just want total number of minutes that they were in Zoom for the event, and that can be helpful for CPD points and things like that, right? Like they just want to know that they were there for a certain number of minutes, and so then they can send an attendance certificate or something. But
Yeah.
no, but I really like. Let me show you just the graph as an example of. Let me think here. I can show you this event. Might be still drawing them out. It's not a great example because of this. This meeting is always low numbers, but this is the type of thing that I've been playing around with. 24th of May, 22. So then, yeah, every 10 minutes, looking at that number, seeing where it goes. So of course this is only across 2 hours, but when you look at it, an event that sort of has across a longer period, and then looking at it each day, but that's just total number. And that's actually capturing it every 10 minutes, and then just saying like this was the daily maximum that we had for that event for that day, and that's creating that data set itself, not using either Zoom data or our own data. So we're capturing Zoom data as it happens as well, and have been for some time, and that's working quite well, but we haven't got the reports so much working quite yet. There's lots of different ways of having that output. So
Yeah.
it was really good timing that you sent your requests.
So like, and thanks for showing that graph, because like I would use that graph. Like one of the questions we want to answer is, first of all, it was the first time we ran this sort of content in a challenge format. So the like one of the questions is, you know, when you book your challenge dates, your event dates, you also agree on what time you're going to deliver. Now the question is, was it the right time for our delivery? Now, I've already pulled data from our CRM system to see, okay, where did the majority of the opt-ins come in? So now there's a question of what was really interesting is that the majority of the opt-ins normally would be like Europe and the US, but this was Europe and Australia. And I was like, okay, now we're tapping into a new market, which is great. But was it because of the time? Like, do we need to consider changing the time of how we would deliver this again in November? So I would use a graph like that to see, well, what was the peak, at what was the peak time that the majority of the people showed up, and then try and adjust like our times for upcoming events. The other thing is like the joins on Zoom is one thing, but like working with Anne, what's really important to her first and foremost is what is the consumption of content. So it's not just joining on Zoom, but are people consuming Like, because all the blog posts that I wrote was all like content driven blog posts, because she's got such a high value in education and such a high value on teaching. But now I cannot measure, was there a consumption on the actual content, even if you didn't attend on Zoom, which is not an issue for us, but out of everybody else that checked in, like, did they actually consume the content? And we can't measure that, right? So it's like, I can't help her make better decisions on, do we update the content? Was the content too much? Was it too little? Did people consume it? So there's so many different ways of obviously looking at data when it comes to like fulfilling an event. Now, not everybody is going to look at it in the same way, but everybody that I work with, they're very focused on, what does the data tell us and how do we make better data-driven decisions so we can increase our delivery? Obviously, the sales you make on the back end, that's ideally what you want to make, but you're not going to get there unless your content is quality content and there's consumption of the content.
So good. So good. Yeah. And you rightly pointed out about the gamification or the point system as well, that when you have that turned on, there are some data points that are being captured because that's turned on. And one of the things that I'm wanting to work towards is being able to capture all of the interactions that people have with the dashboard, and be able to export it, yes, but search it so that you could take examples of individuals, and see what their experience was, so that you could see, they went into Zoom for an hour, but then they went back to the dashboard and they looked at a sponsor's booth, or they watched a video, and what video was it, and for how long did they watch that video. And so I've actually I've made a prototype that was working really well, of a video that was tracking the amount, the percentage of video watched, and then I was able to use that data and add that to the point system, so they were getting points. Now, gamification does act, I always thought it was a bit of a gimmick, but the more that we've seen it, it really does drive engagement in the site, or at least exploration of the site. When people can see that they get point, and the little notification pops up and the little toast pops up and says, "Hey, you got another, you got another 50 points," or whatever. People do start hunting around more, and they realize if they download a PDF from the sponsor, then they get another 20 points, and if they go to the sponsor's booth, they get 100 points. That in itself can be helpful, but that data is really helpful. And so seeing what people do, did they download the PDF before they went to the booth, or did they go to the booth first and then get the PDF, right? Or did they watched only 20% of the video that we had posted on the dashboard and they never completed it? Or we have 50% of the people did complete the video, and that was the 5-minute video, but the 10-minute video, right? This is all stuff I know that but we're totally talking the same language, and I hope that is encouraging for you, that we're not blind to what you're asking for, and that we're capturing lots of it, but not necessarily have an output of that yet. And some of it we're not quite getting. So a button, when you have certain integrations set up, you can have a tag triggered that goes back to the CRM when someone clicks a button, and it can be any button. And so that can be helpful, but we need to be able to capture that regardless of integrations, like we want to be able to have that and then have that export. So, I'm really encouraged by what you're saying, because it feels like we're on the right track.
Yeah. And I appreciate, like Heather shared, the whole, like, using Zap, and, you can tag people in CRM, and I was like, well, of course, like, I don't think of that, right? But it was also on the assumption that, like, we would be collecting a lot more data directly from the Obvio system. What was really helpful, and I just want to acknowledge, Heather, thank you so much for sending me those reports yesterday, because what it showed me immediately is our sessions were 2 hours, but the average time spent on each like Zoom call was between 70 and 85 minutes. So I already know the session was too long. Like, how do we condense the sessions and make them a little bit shorter? So that's already super helpful. But what was interesting is our VIP Q&A call was 2 hours. It was like maybe 2 hours 15. And we had people, like the average time spent was 128 minutes. They were basically on there the entire time. So that already helps us determine like, how do we give value to like generals and how much we give them in terms of time versus how much we give to our VIPs. So that was really helpful. Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate it.
That is, and I guess this is the thing too. When you read the data, there can be different therefores or reasons for it too, right? Like you're saying that the first one that your analysis of it is of it being too long, but I guess it can also be the content itself and how engaging the content is. What's the reason people are leaving, and did they come late or did they leave early? And like, there's so much more to it, isn't there?
Yeah. And that's why like the joins and the leaves are important as well. But in terms of content, like Anne taught the full like 2 hours, but she's also teaching like financial freedom, financial management, thinking about your numbers. That in itself is very heavy. So it's like, so looking at that, we already know, because her concern was, am I teaching for too long? Because I don't want to lose people. When you're teaching something as heavy as thinking about your numbers, thinking about finances, numbers themselves can be very scary to people. Talking about your finances can be very scary. You're taking into account the psychological, the emotional, and like the spiritual effect that it has on people, right? So just looking at that, she's comfortable enough to go, you know what, let's make it an hour and a half and let me condense my content and let me not share too much that's going to like scare people away. But if we had the joins and the leaves, that would give me more of an accurate perspective of how much people consumed. But I really do appreciate 100%. Like being open to like just looking at the suggestions, and I shared it obviously because like I think it's a great system and I'd love to roll it out with other clients. But I also know like Anne is a little bit more flexible in terms of like, okay, well, this is all we got. But I know that there are other people that are going to go, no, unless I have this, I don't actually want to invest in a new system. Does that make sense? So just managing people's expectations.
Totally.
So thanks for that.
Yeah,
Let me not take over the
really...
whole call.
No, that's really good. Well, some more people have come as we were talking about data and stats and thinking about how we can get different reports. I'm all about it. I think it drives it. Jenny's all very interested. Hello, Jenny. It's good to see you. I'm all about the data and reports and things that we can dive into it, and hopefully we can not just have raw data exports, but actually have some things that can do some analysis for you, so that you can go to a page and it says, this is what we did, some data crunching, and this is what we can see, and it kind of lays it out automatically for you. That's the type of stuff I'd like to get to, and potentially AI sort of interpretation of stuff as well. I'm interested in. So great. So Heather, we bought some time for people to put in some questions?
Yeah, so Amy has a question. She said that she's noticed that when I'm cutting and pasting information into the attendees list, and when I'm creating buttons on the cards template, that I can't highlight to remove or replace words. I have to delete each letter. When I highlight the word, the entire edit box disappears.
Yeah, now I think I might know what that is. And really it is a bug, but it's a real tiny one. Let me see if I can replicate it. Again, I was playing around with this the other day. So it was, so this is importing, cutting and pasting information into the attendee list. So let's assume, I think what you're saying is you're editing an attendee. Yeah. So I'll tell you that we need to fix this. But I'll just show you what I think is happening for you, and the possible workaround until we fix it. So what you'll see here, so this must be where you're adding text, but say you wanted to get rid of blue, you're selecting it. So now if I select it, I was able to select it and change it. But this is what I think is happening. If you select it and then your mouse goes outside, when I let go of the mouse, you see,
Yep.
right?
Right.
So
Well, okay.
So if my mouse is out, I've still got it holding down, and I release, and same would go anyway. But if I do it and stay within here,
Oh,
then
okay.
then it's fine. Now,
So the other place I've
as
been
a
seeing it is
Yeah.
in when I'm editing buttons. So when I have the button editor open and I'm trying to change the
Okay.
title of a button, I'm getting the same thing.
Could be the same thing. That's not doing it there for me. Now, you said you were on cards though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it could actually be to do with this a little bit. Some updates we've done with this.
Okay.
Anyway, I think that's what it is, and I'd be interested for you to play a little bit and just see if you don't go outside of the window when you release, whether it's okay. But let me say again, it shouldn't do that. It's really weird behavior actually, because I've not seen that kind of happen when you're doing a select tool and then where you're releasing can close the dialog box. So,
And one of the reasons that I even brought the question up was the other day I was showing my husband one of our new dashboards, and it had an introductory email on it, or not email, but just an introductory blog. And he highlighted it because he was going to copy it to something that he could then use it for. And it all disappeared and it was no longer on the dashboard. And I was like, what did you just do?
yeah, that's not ideal.
No, it got fixed. So it's all back.
Okay. Yeah. This is often the thing that happens. I had not noticed that in previous versions, and I think one of the little updates that we've done, and this is often what happens, right? You actually make a few steps forward with a new feature or something, and then a step back when you realize that there's something that unintended consequence.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but
that
I'm
helps.
just noting that. Yeah. So there's a slight workaround there. I think you may be able to select, and you may be able to double or triple click on the words as well, right? And that would select them, and you would not be outside the window then, and that should work too. So that's another thing. But I'm just going to make a note of that. This is a good example of having to do a video because it's how do you explain what's happening. Okay. What's next, Heather?
Yes, so Muddy's asked, are the text reminders for this call going out from Obvio? Doesn't look like the text went out. PS, how is the SMS system coming along?
Yeah, I think the schedule may not have happened for today. So it was just a dropped ball. But look at all it was just a test to see who was really faithful. And without a reminder, would they still show up? And look, here they are. That's impressive. Yeah, SMS has been delayed slightly this week. There was a couple of other higher priority things that came through that were needing to be fixed. It's like the integrations that all they have to do is change something and then it breaks everything for us, and then we've got to spend days on fixing it. So that's the strengths and weaknesses of relying on third party services and things. So yeah, soon. It's been soon for a while, but yeah. Maybe I laugh. Exactly. Next question.
Muddy wants to know if you're moving or if you got robbed.
Well, let me say this. Am I moving? Check this out. Oh no. I forgot about that. I'm still getting used to my standing desk. So if you have a standing desk, don't put your chair underneath the desk when you go to put it down. That's my day one. That's my day one learning. So I was trying to be clever and saying, "Am I moving?" Yes, I'm moving. See, there we go. So I've just changed my whole. I took everything out of my studio and slowly put it back. And I've got some different lights that I'm still working out, but and I've put up my speakers, and yeah, there's lots going on in this little what is it, 12 foot by 9 foot, yeah, about that space that this little cubby that I have in my garage. It's a room within a room in the garage, a little soundproof studio space. So there'll be more things that will end up behind me at some point, but I'm enjoying having a standing desk. It's good. Recommend it. There we go. Yes. What did you call it, Heather? My CSI.
I thought it looked like a CSI tent at first. I saw the lights and it kind of looked like a plastic tent behind you.
As long as you didn't say it was like a Dexter.
Well,
Dexter
that's
tent.
originally what I thought, but I was like, let me not go there.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll have to put some other things in here to make it less tent-like. Yeah, forensic field lab. Nice. All right, I'll change it. Good thing I didn't do red lights behind me.
Yeah, that would have been a little too.
All right, what have we got next?
We are waiting for more questions to come in.
Oh, look at that. Oh, it's going to be an early night if we don't get more questions in. Jenny, how have you gone with the internet, Jenny? Have you worked it out?
I was just putting that in the chat.
Nice.
Muddy was gracious enough to get on with me for an hour the other day and, kind of run through things. So I'm still trying to solve it. I could barely even I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they're messing with the tower or something, but I could even barely send a text message this morning. So it's turning into an actual real issue. Yeah. So I'm getting on the phone today. I didn't have time yesterday, but I'm getting on the phone today.
Muddy, what was your diagnosis?
Be
Yeah.
kind, buddy. Be kind.
No, I was just going to say for the benefit of others, what we talked about is really kind of two parts. There's the internet that gets to the house, and then there's what happens with the internet inside of the house. And Jenny is using T-Mobile as a service provider, so the signal getting to the house is a wireless cellular signal. And so the device that the company provides is picking up that cellular signal. And so the first thing we looked at is, where is the best place for that device to be located in order to receive the best signal from the tower, right? So it turns out that modem, that router / modem, kind of dual purpose device that T-Mobile provides, shows on the side of it kind of how many bars it's receiving. And so we were able to kind of move around the space a little bit and try and find, is it better by the window? Is it better up high? Where is that? And so so that's really the first part, and understanding that, getting the internet to, but then how is that internet distributed then within the space? And Jenny was on Wi-Fi. So that device also was sending a Wi-Fi signal, but it did have 2 Ethernet ports on the back of it. So we found an Ethernet cable and connected Ethernet directly from that router to her computer. So at least within her space, we're going to have the most stable and fastest possible connection within the space. Because even if you have good Wi-Fi, it's always going to have more variability than if you have an Ethernet cable. It turns out, unfortunately, even when we optimized the Ethernet cable, really the weak point in the chain is the cellular signal getting there. And the last thing I shared with her is, when for cellular service, there's actually 2 parts to the equation. There's the signal strength to the tower, but there's also the throughput of the tower itself. And so Jenny doesn't seem to have it's just a couple, and it was highly variable. Even in one spot, it would fluctuate 3 bars, 2 bars, 1.5 bars. And so it really was a pretty variable signal coming to her. What I've experienced in my area with our cell phones is that we have 4 bars or 5 bars to the tower. We have a great connection to the tower, strong signal strength, but so do 100,000 other people in this area, and it's just over capacity. So there's not enough throughput for the tower. So I was wondering, because she's described the fact that on weekends, or when there's, she was describing the 4th of July parade, when there were a bunch of people kind of in that local area, the signal dropped almost to, unusable. And so I was wondering if capacity was part of the issue, but we're really not able to tell because the signal strength is fluctuating. But anyway, even if you have strong signal, it could be that the tower doesn't have enough throughput when you're dealing with cellular signals. So anyway, we're doing the best we can. But the last thing we talked about is, and the reason she's going to reach out to T-Mobile is, if it's not able to provide usable internet, that may be a reason to get out of a contract. So that's what we're, or to see if they have a way to, increase the signal strength or some kind of booster or something like that. So
unfortunately, in this area where it shows you have Xfinity and all that, as far as cell service, you are limited to just a couple. I mean, you don't, normally you'd want, say, AT&T, which is strong, across most parts of the country. Their AT&T is literally non-existent here. So Verizon is the big carrier that I've seen for T-Mobile, and Verizon are the 2 big carriers for Indiana. I lived in Florida for 100 years, and I had cheapo Cricket. Stop smiling, Grant. I had cheapo Cricket for probably 5 years, and I could take that all the way across the country and never had, always had good service. But when I came to Indiana, it was, I had to switch. So it is limited here.
So when you said about Xfinity, are you saying like there's not you can't get any sort of cable or phone like phone line service.
Yeah, I can get Xfinity. I just greatly dislike them. I've had it, you know, I used to have them back in Florida and they're horrible. I mean, it's just, yeah. But Xfinity seems to be the, if you want cable. I notice a lot of people in this, I live in a teeny tiny little town. I mean, literally there's a turkey that walks up the main street. It's hilarious. So, but I notice on most of the houses in like this neighborhood, they all have dishes, you know, for their TV and that kind of thing. So it's something I have to get on today and I have to deal with that I've avoided because I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, if that's a coaxial cable that you can get, that that's definitely going to be better than the cellular service that you're getting. So
It was not bad prior. It's just this past week. And so I don't know. I just don't trust it. None of them will tell you the truth. That's what's unfortunate. They do not tell you the truth on what is really available or how well it's going to work. Or it'll work great for the first month and then it doesn't after that. And that's one of the problems I had with Xfinity. It was great for the first 30 days. And then after the first 30 days, it went down to, you know, and that was in a big city in Florida. So it's just something it's an annoyance I'm going to have to deal with today. I'll let y'all know next week.
Yeah. I mean, it really, it can be a lot of expense, but it's not going away as a utility for us now, right? Like, particularly with what you're wanting to do business wise, but it's everything else that we do now, right? Like, and when you're talking about people using dishes, you know, like they can totally watch TV, you know, on those dishes, and they can be really those older style satellite, because it can be really low latency, and so it doesn't really matter because you're just watching kind of like it's just one way. They are technically two way, but it's mostly just one way, and so it's a very different thing than doing internet and then also doing low latency calls like this. Is a different type of experience, and so yeah, we have we've got there's an app and a map that we have here in Australia that maps all of the cell towers, and when you click on each one of the cell towers, it tells you the bandwidth allocation that they have going to the cell tower, which is really helpful. And then, so when I've done some trips, you can imagine Australia, you know, the size of Australia is pretty similar to continental USA, and but of course our population is a fraction, and so there's lots of parts of Australia that don't have coverage at all, or you know, or it's just very spread out. And so when I've been doing some trips around Australia, I will plan my trips based on where I know there's good cell coverage, and that's where I can set up for the night and get
Right.
work done. So that's what I've done before. But anyway, it is a key thing that, you know, it's like we're talking about this on an Obvio call, because if you guys don't have good internet, you know, you don't have a good show, you don't have good events, you don't get, you know, a quality service. It's the number one priority is getting
Well,
it right.
one of the, you know, for me personally, in my business, to pack everything up and to move it to, say, a space that has good internet, having to do that on a weekly basis or, you know, or bi-weekly basis, it's not feasible. It's not practical. So I'm going to have to solve it. It's something I have avoided. I admit it. And, but Muddy has been incredibly helpful. So big, huge shout out to him taking the time out and helping us newbies.
It's
Appreciate
really
it.
nice, Muddy. Thank you. He's often reaching out to people, helping out where he can. It's really nice. My my standing desk is a Omni desk. I don't know if it's an Australian one or not. Yeah, it says Australia's best standing desk, but I don't know. I got a bamboo top on it, and yeah, I'm happy. It's one little happy redhead.
Just wanted to ask Amy, what is Next Link? I've never heard of that. A business channel? It's in the chat.
Yeah, Nextlink is just a company that provides internet service out here. Because, you know, I don't know if you can see it. This is where we live. There's not a whole lot next to us either. And so we have a couple of different companies out here, but Nextlink is the only one that we could even hook up with. So, and it's just a site tower, like it's behind that tree. So
Yeah, and there is lots of different options that you can get. Different companies that will provide different ways of doing it. So that's probably a point to point. It's probably going to a cell tower equivalent, and but it's doing a real narrow point to point, and a 30 meg up and down is great. That's quite reasonable, right? Like that's a you can push quite a good stream, and you can have quite a good download as well. And so particularly
the nice thing about
Zoom.
having that dedicated 30 is if it's not 30, we call them and they're on it right away and they can fix it.
That's great.
So
that's really good. Yeah, it could be a microwave tower. Yeah. There's lots of different. Microwave can go a long way. Anyway, internet's a fascinating thing, but Starlink, once again, I'd recommend having a look at Starlink as well, but potentially, like nothing's going to be better than a physical cable, some copper that's going into your house, or fiber preferably, but you're not going to get fiber out there. But having some copper that comes into your house, in theory, is always going to be the best connection that you can get, and the lowest latency as well. And so so keep at it. It's super important. If heard me say before, again, like the priorities of internet, and then sound, and then lighting, then camera, and then environment. And so when you get all of those things right, then you can have a great event. But the very first thing is internet. You've got to get a really nice rock solid, and ideally you've got a backup. And sometimes you don't, right? But one of the things I have, I've got fiber coming in my house, and then I've also got, there's a 5G cell tower that I can see out of my backyard, and so I put a mobile router on the back of my house outside, sort of underneath the eave, and I run an Ethernet cable down the side of my house, and then now that's my backup, and sometimes I'll use that for separate. When I'm doing a larger event, I'll have my main connection doing all the mission critical stuff, and then my second connection kind of doing some of that secondary things that could drop out, and it's okay. So I have several different cellular companies that I use as well. So, and then I've had Starlink as well. So it's good to know what your options are. All right. Is there any other questions that came through?
Yeah, so John wants to know, he said he was slightly late, but Blue suggested some changes were about to be released. Any material that we should know about? More generally, is there a release note posted anywhere when there is a new release of Obvio?
Yeah, we would like that. I've kind of talked about that as release notes or version notes, or a change log or that type of thing. Um, and it means us sort of changing the way that we do the releases and managing those versions in the way that we've been doing it. Like they sort of overlap each other. But I think we need to get to that, and so then you can really see what you might have missed. It's just another administrative layer that we need to put in place to be able to do that. And I guess one of the things that we've done is these calls to try to cover that, you know. But to your question about Blue was kind of teasing last week about some things that might change. And I was just explaining to Muddy that we had a couple of things this week that kind of took priority. A couple of the integrations with HubSpot and things like that that actually were changing and stopped working in some areas, and so we had to jump on that, and that slowed us down on a couple of those things. So it won't be too long, and we'll have another couple of big changes coming. So I've got a really I guess, yeah, I would tell you, and Muddy, you'll know this for sure, when we're talking about the co-host chat overlapping problem. Firstly, we've gotten to the bottom of the problem, and also know that Zoom is not going to change it. And what's more important about all of that is that we have a really good workaround, not just workaround, solution to it, which is actually going to solve a bunch of issues. And so we now just have to implement it, but it's going to fix a few things, and that's just one of them. I guess I can be a bit more explicit. What we're going to do is be able to have people join as a co-host that can't reclaim host, and we can name them so they'll come in as their Obvio username as a co-host. They will be a distinct user, and so then the chat will work. So it fixes that. It fixes the name issue, so they come in as their name, and then it also stops co-hosts being able to reclaim host. So yeah, kind of, we that's right. We may end up with two ways of starting the meeting in a way. You know, it's like the actual Obvio user or the host user, and then co-hosts. So, and that's the thing we're just working out. But Zoom is really not going to change the way that we've been doing it now, because they're moving so much more and more and more to people being logged into Zoom. And they want that unified chat that ties into their team chat that happens within the Zoom app. And so, and we're still holding on to not having to have people log in, our users or our attendees. We don't want anyone to have to log into Zoom. So yeah, I'm quite excited about that. Yeah, that's right. And that have you tried that, Muddy? And once they come in, then they are distinct, right? Yeah. It's all about who they come in as, the user, and that's the way that we can get around it, is we bring them in as a unique user, as a co-host. And then that's fine.
Using the speaker link allows them to get in before the area is open, as long as the room is open. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the other
that's
thing
right.
you want to do with team members, is you want everybody in before you open the area.
Yeah, that's true. That's another little workaround. Anyway, so that's another thing that's coming, and I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be a really nice addition. And we've got some larger events. You can imagine which ones that have lots of volunteer crew that need to be able to come in and manage really large scale events. Well, now having this type of thing, they'll come in with the right name. They won't have to change their name. They can't accidentally reclaim host and cause problems. The reclaim host is a problem not just because you're now the host, but you've removed the once was host. You've removed their credentials altogether. So now they can't do anything. They're not even a co-host, and um, yeah, cutting that reclaim host. And I don't know if it was always there, but I only just noticed now in the more menu in the participants that you can reclaim host from that drop down menu as well. So if you want to rename yourself, you're only one item away from reclaiming host. It's like, does it really need to be that accessible to be able to reclaim the host? You know what I mean? It's like it could hide it away a little bit more, but anyway. All right, Franklin, we must be getting close to the end because Franklin's asking a question.
Yeah, he knows that there's a delay for the SMS, but is also delayed for marketplace and broadcast as well.
Yeah. So yeah, so broadcast as in broadcast is what we call the email and the SMS system. So it's the same. The email broadcast is working well. That's working great, and we added in those filters. They're working well, and so that's good. It's just that the SMS has just been delayed a little bit. Just a little bit more to do there, and then it's all good. The complexity of that is actually the payment, right? Like tracking all of because it costs. So tracking all of the costs, particularly some international, some countries that can be quite expensive, and so tracking all of that, making a payment system that works, all of that is really close, and the marketplace, yeah, it has been a total rewrite, which we are excited about too because it's become another sort of modular system that is making us think about themes in our general dashboard themes and possibilities of different kind of modules. And yeah, there's a couple of new themes that we're looking at as well, that are all kind of coming down, that something quite different, a different way of laying things out. So we're excited about that too. So but yeah, I think, yeah, you give us another week, we'll know quite a bit more about where we stand there. A week goes very quickly, right? All right. There's no more questions at the moment, Heather.
No, I can start pulling things out
You
of the air.
think, yeah, you think people are scared of my tent?
Probably. I'd be afraid that you might startle them a little bit.
That's right. Yeah. Well, great. If there aren't any other questions, novel approaches. I just love when people come and they just want to, just in case something interesting comes up, hang around. John's got better things to do. He's out of here.
So, Grant, I have a question for you, and this is a Zoom, really Zoom infrastructure question. So, it came back to mind when you were talking about the co-host even when you promote someone to co-host, they get some additional abilities that if they are just a speaker who you want to be able to unmute themselves or share their screen, you don't want them to see the breakout room dialogue and some other things. So I know that there has been lots of inquiries from those in the kind of production and broadcast space to have another level of permission. Are you aware of any conversations happening in Zoom? You know, for instance, for a big meeting, we don't want regular attendees to be able to unmute themselves, but I'd love to have a speaker designation that's not full co-host, but to give someone give an individual the ability to unmute themselves and share screen, right? Because those are the things a speaker might need to do. I feel like I've heard Andy say that theoretically could be doable, or where you could define roles. I know it's a kind of big deviation from what's happening now, but since we had just a couple minutes, I thought I'd ask if you're aware of any conversations.
I know that the conversations have been had. One of the things that I saw within the Zoom OSC documentation, there was a moderator, like user, and it piqued my interest because it was like, oh, hang on, how is that different to a co-host or a host? The trick I find with Zoom is their tendency to go to webinar. Like they really think of larger events based in webinar. The Zoom events platform, while you can run meetings in it, it's mostly designed around webinar. And when they bring these new features in, they bring them into webinar. And so your point about having a speaker be able to unmute themselves, they would say, yeah, that's a panelist. And because they're not thinking in the way that we do around, we want to use meeting, we want to see everyone. And so hopefully we're getting the message across a little that we need these sorts of things in meeting. And one of those things that we saw that they brought over was the Q&A module, right? So Q&A used to be just in webinar, and they brought it into meeting. That's not a big deal for lots of our meetings, because we want to get engagement on the dashboard, right? So we want, like what we're doing right here, we have people ask questions on the dashboard because it gets people used to going back to the dashboard and using that, and then we can tie it into point systems. It also means that we can scale our meetings larger as well, right? So if we do have multiple meetings, we have one place that people are asking questions, not in lots of Q&A modules that are across lots of meetings. But the example still stands that they did bring something from webinar into meeting. And my hope would be they do the same with that, almost that idea of a panelist, where you could have someone who is able to share and unmute and a couple of different functionality. Another thing is like chat moderating, right? Like you want to give someone the ability to be able to delete messages across in the chat, but I don't want them to be able to do anything else, and sometimes you want co-hosts to be able to do some things in breakout rooms, but you don't want them to be able to close all breakouts, right? Having a co-host that can close all breakouts can be a real problem for large events. So yeah, I think we all have to kind of lobby Zoom on some of that front. But I think it's coming. Do of course there's one thing you can do with Zoom OSC is when someone unmutes, yeah, you can auto mute it. But I mean, have it based on a label is one of the things, right? So a label for us would be to say, if there's no star in the name, then mute them again. And so then they'd just be fighting against OSC that we keep muting them. And if they've got a star in their name, it stays unmuted. It's a pretty hacky sort of workaround version, right? But it's possible. Those sorts of things that you can do with programmatically controlling Zoom. So, but yeah, it's a great question. We've got to keep on top of it.
Muddy asked in the chat, I don't know if you saw this, but how can we add Q&A to Obvio meetings?
Yeah, good question. It's another one you've heard me say before about when creating a new area, I want to add a bunch of options. Have a bunch of options to enable or disable for across the meetings within that area. So some might be user based, and then some would be meeting based, or most of them would be meeting based. And when I've been through, I can kind of identify 5 or 6 different options that you may want to preset. And some of those are in meeting options as well, but that you could disable them, for example, so yeah, I haven't got no, I haven't, but I should. That's a good idea. Just to plan that out. I have kind of got a list of things that I've looked at to enable the another one of those options would be profile pictures, right? Is allowing profile pictures, because that's a particular tricky one at the moment while we haven't got that ability, because while you can disable it, it's an in-meeting option to turn off profile pictures. That's quite a big ask when we have an event with 200 meetings, and that happens, right? And so now that's so we're stuck in this middle ground at the moment, because I want to be able to do it. And Q&A is another one of those. Once again, Q&A we could enable account wide, but then it would be on by default, and it would require people to disable Q&A in meeting. It comes up in the security options. You can disable, allow Q&A or something like that. Now it would default to on. And if we had that, we know that we would have people running meetings not be aware that that Q&A is enabled, and people adding Q&A and then get very distracted or confused by this whole other Q&A module. But if we had it as an option when you're creating the area, then that'd be even better. So it's coming. That's another good one. Cool.
Muddy posted a question. Have you considered limiting phone connecting to meetings, since it limits video quality to 720p?
No. I mean, if you look at the stats, what's interesting when we look at stats account wide, surprisingly, we are probably like 60%. I should look at it again, but it was like 65% desktop or like laptop desktop computers, which obviously still leaves 30-40% on mobile. And so still a lot of people that want to be able to access it on their mobile device, and some people only have a mobile device too, right? So I just wish that they would allow 1080 that would go to a mobile device. Or actually, it's one of the things that Zoom does. It says it's HD, and so it's either 720 or 1080. And it'll, if a device can only do, yeah, there you go, remove the 720p limitation. That's the thing.
Well, and what's crazy to me, one of the really strong points about Zoom is it only delivers the video quality to each individual client that their system can handle based on computer resources and bandwidth. So it seems like obviously they know if it's a mobile device. And so it seems like they could easily just only send 720 to the mobile device, but not limit everyone else. So, okay. I'll follow up with you. Thanks.
You're like, you got a little soapbox there. I know it's weird. I guess you think about the bandwidth that they're talking about, and so I guess they were just like, we're going to send one HD, either 720 or 1080. If everyone can support 1080, we'll send 1080. But if some people can only support 720, we're now only going to send 720. And I don't see that changing from their point of view, right? Like, it's a huge amount of bandwidth difference, and a whole nother transcode that they have to do live. So it's interesting.
The other thing I would point out is and I was actually talking with Jenny about this, the difference between a standard Zoom account that's not HD enabled, a 360p video, to go from that, right? If I put that down here in this corner, to go from that to 720 is increasing that fourfold, right? It's 4 times the resolution. To go from 720 to 1080p is just another kind of 50% beyond that. So the big jump is getting to 720. So
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else? Anyone? Doesn't look like it. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hope you have another great week. Standing desk that also looks like a hurdle. Yeah, so we'll be back on next Wednesday at a more reasonable hour for some of you, which will be 5 p.m. Eastern. And we may have Blue back as well, so we'll see. In the meantime, I'll just be in my blue tent, thinking of blue. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.